Real experts do not talk like this. There was a study done where they looked at, it was military, and they had people sleep either 8 hours or 4 hours. And in the 4-hour group, they had a 236% increase in the risk of an acute injury. If you look at the data on longevity, quality of life, past the age of 50, 60, your lean mass is very predictive. NEAT is probably one of the biggest determinants of whether somebody is obese prone or obese resistant phenotype. Exercise helps with appetite regulation because there's quite a bit of research to show that it increases your sensitivity to satiety signals. I mean, okay, beets increase nitric oxide, maybe that make your boner like 0.1% harder. Okay, cool. If you're still living a really crappy lifestyle, you're not going to notice it, so good luck with that, I guess. The magic you are looking for is in the work you keep attempting to avoid.
Have you ever wondered the science behind fat loss? Well, I'm Dr. Rena Malik, urologist and pelvic surgeon, and welcome back to the Rena Malik MD podcast, your source for evidence-based information about your sexual health and more. Today, we have a guest who has millions of followers on social media. He is a PhD in clinical nutrition with a degree in biochemistry, and he spends his time debunking terrible misinformation online, and that is none other than Dr. Layne Norton. Dr. Norton is a wealth of information. He is not only an expert in clinical nutrition, he is also a professional world record keeping bodybuilder who also trains other professionals and helps people achieve their goals with weight loss and bodybuilding. We start with talking about why we are all at risk for believing misinformation and how easy it is to extrapolate data from studies to make it sound like this is the only thing that's going on. We also talk about dealing with failure and chronic pain and how to get through having issues with pain and injury. We discuss non-exercise activity thermogenesis, calories in, calories out. We talk about different types of diets, including the low carbohydrate diet and the carnivore diet. There is something in this episode for everyone, so I hope you guys really enjoy. Layne, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
I'm really excited about this interview. I've been following you for a long time, and I think the thing that strikes me the most is that you're not afraid to call out bullshit. And like, that's really valuable. And I think, there's so many people, myself included, who has a little hesitation to call people out. And I think it's really important and needed.
Yeah, I think, when you get into that, it's kind of like, the door swings both ways, right? So if you start calling people out, you're going to eat it a little bit and whatnot. But I mean, the reality is if you're putting stuff out there, if you're making an opinion, you're going to piss somebody off anyway. And so for me, I mean, I very much I want to say I started writing for bodybuilding.com back in 2002. So I've been in this industry in one form or another, over 20 years. And, for the first probably decade, I would talk about myths, but I'd never call anybody out specifically. And I just kind of figured, these people, they're not going to have long-lasting success because they're going to be flash in the pans. And I really have. You see a lot of people come in, make a big splash, and then they're gone. Yeah. And what I always tell people is like, yeah, they're big now. It doesn't have staying power. But the problem is there's always more of these people coming in, and there's also always new people coming in to fitness, wellness, whatnot. And I think more than just wasting money, there's actually health ramifications to this stuff. Mm-hmm. One, the confusion, it kind of prevents people from just getting started. They have paralysis by analysis. They don't know what to do. And two, misinformation really has unintended consequences. I'll give you an example. Diet soda. People will say, you'll see influencers make videos saying diet soda is just as bad for you or worse than regular soda. I mean, it's unequivocally not based on the human randomized control trials. I mean, this is not even close to a disputable fact. And in fact, it actually sometimes outperforms water when they have people substitute it for water. Now, it's not magic. It's not a fat burner. It's just kind of satisfying that sweet taste that people might get otherwhere. And if they're having water instead, maybe they're filling that somewhere else. Yeah. But when you tell people, diet soda is just as bad, and their justification for this is, well, if people just, what's wrong with drinking water? Like, I just want them to drink water. Who cares if it's misinformation, if it's helping them drink more water? But that's not what people do.
Yeah.
they go, I can't ever imagine not drinking soda, so I'm just going to drink regular soda.
Right.
And so what you've actually done is do the exact opposite of what you intended to do. And I draw a lot of parallels between legislation and finances when I talk about fitness, because I think there are a lot of parallels. And one of my favorite two quotes from Thomas Sowell, which is, there are no solutions, only trade-offs, which I think applies across the board. Now, you may choose to do a certain thing. It's likely going to have trade-offs, pluses and minuses, but it may be a lot of pluses in your particular situation. And then he also said, to have compassionate policy, you must have dispassionate analysis of the data. Meaning, we can't just say, well, we're going to do this because it feels good and it feels like our intention is to help people. I don't care about the intention, because even most of the people I call out, I think most of them actually do have good intentions. I don't think they're out to actively harm people.
Yeah.
In some cases, I think there's a lot of cognitive dissonance. And in some cases, I do think there are some bad people out there who just care about money. But for the most part, I think they convince themselves that they're trying to help people. And so they go, well, my intention is good. Well, guess what they say about the path to hell? It's paved with good intentions, right? And so we have to stop looking at what was the intention of the message, and we have to look at what is the actual outcome of the message, right? And I'll give you one more example of that. A while back, Paul Saladino was talking about, don't eat oatmeal. It has phytates, which are going to leach out minerals and all this kind of stuff. And, of course, I go, well, what happens in human randomized control trials where they have people eat oatmeal? Well, they get better metabolic health, more insulin sensitivity. They really don't see depletions in minerals and electrolytes and those sorts of things. So, okay, you got a mechanism, but who really cares? And then the downstream consequences that I think a lot of people don't even think about are people's relationship with food and disordered eating patterns. And so I actually got an email from somebody who works at an eating disorder clinic. And they said, we had just gotten a girl who's 75 pounds eating oatmeal, like a little bit of oatmeal in the morning. And she saw Paul Saladino's video and she refuses to eat it now. And so when you do this fear-based content, you really don't understand the downstream ramifications of what you're doing, which is why when I talk about various things, you don't get a lot of really good sound bites out of me. You don't get a lot of really oh, wow, that will make really grab people's attention, because I'm trying to put a lot of context and nuance around it, because I don't want people to misinterpret that message, because I know how dangerous it is when it does get misinterpreted, or when it's just, people were left to their own devices. So that kind of got me very passionate about, okay, somebody has to do this stuff, And frankly, people are like, why don't you focus on your own stuff? I'm like, I did that for 10 years. And, I would prefer to do that. I'd prefer to talk about the research I did, how to do the behavior change I talk about. But honestly, I really do believe a very significant part of trying to help people is not just calling out bullshit, but also teaching them why it's bullshit.
Yeah, that's
and how to identify it. And how to identify it.
Absolutely. It's funny. You brought up some things that I was like, why do people hate oatmeal? I don't understand. I mean, oatmeal has fiber. It has been shown, as you mentioned, in many trials to improve, blood sugar, improve weight parameters. So ultimately, I just don't understand why these myths are so pervasive. And I get what you're saying. People want to just get in your face and say something that's going to shock you. Oatmeal has no nutritional value or Diet Coke is going to kill you, right? You're going to listen when you hear that. So they've got these hooks that get you listening. And then you're like, oh my God, I know the secret now that people are hiding from me. And there's no secrets. We're not trying to hide things from you. No one is here trying to intentionally hurt you, especially not people who have a background in, medicine, in nutrition, in science. We're trying to help with the data that we have. And sure, someone may have a GI intolerance to oatmeal and they may feel great when they stop eating it, but that doesn't mean that applies to everybody.
Exactly. I think a lot of that, again, and I don't know Paul's entire backstory. I do know he was vegan at one point and then kind of went to the other extreme. But a lot of times what happens is somebody tries a diet and they get results on it. And instead of just going, you know what, I like this. This worked for me. I was able to be consistent with it. That's not good enough. And a lot of it, I think, stems from insecurity. It's like, I feel insecure about what I'm doing, so I need to evangelize everyone and get them on my thing, right? And so they end up like kind of doing this, confirmation bias, where they retroactively kind of try to do, bleep me out if you want to, fuckery with the science, and retroactively show why their way of doing things was the best way of doing things. So, there are people who reduce their vegetable intake and they feel better. They're not feeling better because vegetables are toxic. They're not feeling better. Most of them probably have some sort of FODMAP sensitivity. They probably have some sort of IBS. And if they did an elimination diet, which, by the way, carnivore is basically an elimination diet, and if they added back in specific vegetables slowly, like some of the leafy green vegetables or lower in FODMAPs, they probably wouldn't have pain and discomfort.
Right.
But instead of doing that, it's like, nope, I need to find a way to show that my diet is the best diet. And so therefore, oh, look, I found these compounds in vegetables, therefore toxic. I think there's nothing more dangerous than somebody who's read a biochemistry textbook, like without the appropriate context of overall physiology, right? So I'll never forget, I was on these message boards when I was in college, and I did my degree in biochemistry. And I'm so grateful I did my degree in biochemistry, and then I went and worked under Dr. Don Layman, who also did a biochemistry degree and then a nutrition degree when he was coming up. And he was able to brilliantly frame, he could see the small picture, the biochemical mechanisms, but how it fit with the larger picture. And my first experience with this was on a message board. It was called mindandmuscle.net. I very much doubt it's around anymore. This is like 2003. And I had just learned in biochemistry class that caffeine inhibits glycogen phosphorylase, right? Which is, the glycogen phosphorylase is the enzyme that catalyzes the breakdown of glycogen into glucose. And so I said, after exercise, we should have caffeine because it'll help us store more glycogen. And somebody on the message board who had a background in physiology said, yes, that mechanism exists, but you also got to think about the other things that caffeine does, which it activates the sympathetic nervous system, the overall goal of which is to liberate fuel and break down fuel. So, and what happens if we have caffeine? Blood glucose can go up a little bit, because it is activating that sympathetic nervous system. And another great example is aspirin. Aspirin is an anticoagulant, but it also activates procoagulant pathways. But the overall sum, the net effect, is that it has an anticoagulant effect. So if we look at vegetables, for example, and I don't want to pick on Paul because I think Paul is actually probably a nice guy, but this is just an example I'm thinking of. He had a video where he said, well, you don't want to eat broccoli because it's got our isocyanates in it. And isocyanates can bind to iodine, which is going to impede your thyroid function, and it's going to cause your metabolism to slow down, you'll gain weight. So that's going from A to Z without thinking about anything in between, right? Like if people want to do, if A equals B and B equals C and C equals D, then A equals D. And that's not how metabolism works because there's all these other inputs that are coming in here and inhibiting things and also activating other pathways. So again, I look at, if we look at the studies that actually directly assess this, if we give cruciferous vegetables, does it impede thyroid function? Does it lower metabolic rate? Does it cause people to gain body fat? No, no, and no. And in fact, most people who eat cruciferous vegetables actually tend to have less body fat. So again, it's like, all right, that's a mechanism that exists, but it's just one mechanism. And metabolism is thousands of biochemical mechanisms. And when you have an outcome, whether it be weight loss, whether it be cardiovascular disease, whether it be cancer, whatever, that is the summation of thousands of different pathways adding up to one outcome. Now, just because you have a mechanism doesn't mean you have an outcome. But if you have an outcome, there's absolutely a mechanism. And people don't understand the difference. And I always equate it to, it's kind of like a single stock versus a mutual fund. So I could say, Rena, you don't want to invest in this mutual fund. Look at these two stocks that are down by 50% this year, while completely not telling you that the mutual fund is up by 20% over a year. What do you care about? The two stocks that are underperforming or the fact that this mutual fund's killing it? Yeah. You care about the outcome, that it's killing it.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I try to frame this for people. But that is like the popular influencer kind of template that you can pick some sort of compound present even in organic, natural foods, either make it out to be the greatest thing in the world or the worst thing in the world. And people aren't equipped to really understand like just, the mechanisms versus outcome stuff.
Well, people want shortcuts, right? And people respond to emotion, right? So you said you need to be dispassionate. And that's how, like in finance, you need to be dispassionate about your investments, right? You can't put your money in things just because you like to drink Starbucks. Don't put all your money into Starbucks because it's not going to do well just because you as an individual person like it all the time, right? And I don't know how Starbucks is doing, so I'm not going to we're not talking about that. But in general, like I think it's the same thing. Like you have to look at it without emotion. And the thing is, when you're listening to people talk about nutrition and specifically single ingredients, single outcomes that they find from one biochemical pathway, they're harping on your emotions. They're invoking fear. And that works because we are primed by the news to be scared. We're primed by things around us that we're looking for the next best thing, that the next thing, one, shortcut, and two, like what else should we be scared of that the government's not telling us or that our doctors aren't telling us, right?
Yeah. I there's so many things in there that you just said that are such great points. And I think one is like negative bias, which is people respond much more viscerally to negative things than they do positive things. And just look at the news. I did a post about this the other day. I said, you guys say you hate the news. You say you hate these BS influencers, but your actions say otherwise. Because if everyone tomorrow said, I'm no longer watching the news unless they start putting on positive things, I promise you within 3 months, the news cycle would completely change because they don't care about putting out positive or negative. That's not their business. Their business is getting your eyeballs. And they do billions of market research to figure out what gets the most eyeballs. That's all they care about. That's their currency. And so they are literally giving you what you want. And it's the same thing for influencers when they do this fear-based content. And I've said to people, real experts do not talk like this. They do not talk in absolutes. They do not use fear. They may talk about relative risk, and they may tell you, hey, this can increase your risk of this, but they're not telling you these toxic ingredients. And that's just language they don't use.
Right. Right. And it's very difficult because when you're an expert, everything is nuanced and people don't want nuance. They want a clear, this causes this and this is good because this is good. And when it has nuance, it becomes too complex, especially with our current sort of rapid TikTok brains where you're like used to seeing a clip and you want an answer in a clip. And I actually really resisted TikTok type content for a long time because I was like, how can I talk about something in 60 seconds? Like it's just very difficult to boil down a complex topic in 60 seconds. But people have done really well with it, Well,
and you said something else that's really, really astute, which is we as humans would like to think that we make decisions based on logic and data. Very few of us make decisions based on logic and data. The vast majority of us make decisions based on emotion, which is a major problem. Most of us know the right things to do. And I apply this to myself in not nutrition and training because I'm a robot about that stuff. I'm very logical, data driven. Well, that's not even true. I'll have bad days in the gym and younger Layne would either maybe try to plow through them and do what I had planned or just completely walk out of the gym based on emotion and frustration. And now I'm a little bit more, I still have those emotions, but I can go, okay, well, what makes sense is let's take what's there today. Let's make sure we don't get injured, those sorts of things. But it took a long time to do that. And then in other areas of my life, I acted completely on emotion, like my personal life and those sorts of things, like some personal relationships. Only in the last couple of years through doing a lot of therapy and having some really good friends around me who will tell me the truth, have I gotten much more logically driven about how I do things in my personal life. And that's been a big game changer. But when it comes to most things, again, I would tell everybody out there, think about the decisions you make where you actually are thinking about them. Think about how many of them you make based on data versus your emotion. You know you should exercise. You know you shouldn't eat too much. You know you shouldn't drink too much alcohol. But I had a hard day. But I was feeling down. But I was feeling this. But I was feeling that. And I think not acknowledging feelings is a mistake. You know, the rub dirt on it, suck it up. But I think we have swung too far in the opposite direction in this society, and now we give way too much leeway to our feelings. And I think my friend John Deloney, I think he said this quote. He said something like, you know, we should treat our life more like a movie. We're trying not to be the main character, you know, just try to watch the movie and think objectively about, like, what would it make sense for this character to do, rather than, you know, trying to be the main character all the time.
You know, I've said something similar in the sense, and I think I forget where I originally heard it, but people think of themselves as the hero or heroine of the movie.
Of course.
But they think other people are watching them. And I always tell people, like, nobody cares what you're doing.
Nobody cares.
Right? Nobody. You can feel like you're the heroine of your life, but no one's thinking about you. Right? Yeah. And so if you live in, like, oh, what will people say? What will people think? Like, that's not serving you in any way. Yeah. But, you know, absolutely, we do so much based on emotion. And, you know, like you said, you're very regimented in the gym and nutrition. You are an entrepreneur. You can hang with academics. You can talk about nutrition. You're probably in that, like, top 5% of people who can really do those sorts of things. So tell me, like, how do you maintain that level of intensity and, you know, through the life issues, through the ups and downs of life? How do you maintain that?
I think I've come to embrace the idea that there's seasons of life too, you know, and like when I was, my life's kind of been lived backwards in some ways. Like most people are, you know, single when they're young, they're going out having experiences, you know, they're partying or whatever, you know, that sort of thing. And then when they get older, the career takes over. I was very career focused when I was young, you know, was doing my PhD, was competing in bodybuilding. I had a steady relationship. I wasn't really being very social, but, you know, I was good with it because it's like, okay, I'm doing my PhD and I'm competing in bodybuilding. And I started my first, you know, business venture when I was in graduate school. So there just wasn't room for that kind of stuff. But now as like the business is kind of like I have people in the right places and I can be a little bit more hands off, you know, I've been able to enjoy my social life a little bit more. And, you know, but there's only so many ways I can move these pieces, right? And so like, for example, like I love fishing. I love competitive pistol shooting. I haven't really done those things in a couple years. But I'm good with it because I know like once I go through this phase of, you know, my kids are young and I'm, you know, trying to really scale these businesses, that those things I'll have time for them in the future, you know, and that will be different. I mean, I still love powerlifting right now. I don't foresee myself retiring from it anytime soon, but I'm sure there'll come a day where I'm like, I don't have that same fire and drive to do it. And at that point, I'll be able to do more hobbies, you know? So I've kind of embraced that seasonality of life. And also, honestly, like for me, like the training, I tell people like it doesn't take discipline to keep me in the gym. It takes discipline to keep me out of the gym. I love training. Like I love, you know, training 2-3 hours for 4 or 5 days a week. Like I don't know how to explain it, but the first time I grabbed a barbell, it was like I felt alive. You know, probably sounds dumb to a lot of people out there that don't get it, but I'm sure there's musicians out there that the first time they picked up a guitar, they felt alive, you know, and that was it for me. So, and then of course, like nutrition, I love talking about that stuff. I like reading research papers. You know, most of the stuff I do on a daily basis, I like doing content for social media. I think it's cool. I think it's very cool that I get the opportunity, like the idea, like reach 1 million people. Like that's so crazy to me. So yeah, I think that's how I'm able to maintain that intensity is it doesn't feel like it's, you know, real intensity because it's just kind of stuff I was doing anyway. Even if I wasn't getting paid for it, you know?
So you've taken your hobbies and really scaled them into something you could do. Which people say sort of all the time, right? You should love your work and like enjoy what you're doing, but not everyone has that opportunity. So that's great.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is trying to find the intersection of something you have like a little bit of a natural talent for with something you love and something you could monetize, right? Like there's some things that's like, well, it'd be hard to monetize that, you know? Yeah. I got lucky in that, you know, I kind of have a knack for talking and I wasn't always great at, you know, breaking down things simply. That was a skill that I honed over time. And again, I give a lot of credit to Don Layman, for instilling that in me when I was giving my PhD exit seminar. I told this story a couple weeks ago because he just got a Lifetime Achievement Award at the ASN conference, and I went to it. And it's all him and a bunch of old lab mates. Gabrielle Lyon was there. And, when I was giving my exit seminar, I asked Don, I said, okay, so my mom's going to be in the audience, and then there's going to be professors in the audience. So who do I write the exit seminar for? And he goes, I should learn something, and your mom should learn something. And as you know, that is the hardest kind of now what I've content to do, right? Because it's hard for the average person to learn something without generalizing too much. Mm-hmm. And it's hard for an expert to learn something if you're not getting down into the weeds, right? So I think that's something I honed over time, and I think that's one of my best skills. And I think that's why, again, I've been able to have some success with this.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a skill, I think, for people who are watching and wondering how we've achieved some degree of success in social media. We started from zero, right? And if you look at probably your older content, my older content, it sucks, right? It wasn't very good, but we got better over time.
James Smith does a great bit on that when I was with him in Australia, and he puts up like his first Facebook post and his first YouTube videos and his first Instagram. He goes, look at this trash. Look how garbage this is. He goes, and it was necessary, because you can read about social media, you can read about doing a business, but you cannot plan for everything. And sometimes you just have to learn by experience. And it's just like you could read about surgery, right? Mm-hmm. You could read all about it, but until you actually do it, you're not going to really learn it, right? I read about all these different lab techniques and how they're done. Made a lot of sense. And then I had to go in and fuck stuff up for a while, and then learn through mass error. And that's what actually got me good. And so when people say, well, I'm worried about failing, let me relieve your concerns. You will absolutely fail. It will 100% happen. So you can just stop worrying about it. Yeah. There, it's going to happen. So
everyone does. Yeah. Everyone does. Are you sick of going to the doctor only to have them talk at you for 15 minutes and leave without knowing exactly why they're prescribing you this certain medication and what exactly the next step is to take to optimize your health? Wouldn't it be great to finally find a doctor who actually listens to you, answers your questions, and doesn't rush you out the door? Well, at my practice, Rena Malik, MD, I aim to do just that. I specialize in taking care of patients who have issues with their sex lives, issues with their bladder, with their hormone health, or are having pain in their pelvic region or with sex. My goal is to give you the time and attention you deserve so you can leave with a clear understanding of your condition as well as our treatment plan that's optimized for your goals. During your visit, I'm 100% present with you for an entire hour. And after you leave, you can reach me. It is super easy to send me a message through our secure portal, and I'll get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. No questions asked, no hidden fees. Scheduling is easy. Just visit our website, renamalikmd.com/appointments. We see patients in both Irvine and Beverly Hills, California, and I see patients virtually in California, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. Oh, and don't forget Texas. If you're outside these states, consider seeing me for an educational visit. I look forward to seeing you. So you also mentioned, getting injured. You actually had some injuries that took you out of powerlifting for some time.
Yep.
What was that like for you?
Really tough. So I have become very interested in pain science, modern pain science, which, by the way, there's probably as much or more absolute nonsense and fuckery in pain science as there is in nutrition and fitness. What I thought pain science was, which is what a lot of people think it is, which is, well, your brain is connected to this bag of meat, and if you punch the bag, poke the bag, cut the bag, burn the bag, your brain sends a signal to that area and goes, owie, right? Mm-hmm. And now we know that pain is much more like an emotion and an experience. And in fact, experts call it a pain experience. So I can tell you what the MRIs said about me, but that doesn't necessarily encapsulate what was happening, and I'll explain further. But I've had 4 herniated or bulge discs in my lumbar. I've had, never diagnosed, but based on the symptoms, probably a couple of partial tears in both my hips. I've partially torn both adductors. I fully tore this pec, but that was back in 2008 before I started powerlifting, and I partially tore this pec in 2017. And yet, here at 42 years old, I'm pretty much as strong as I've ever been, and pretty much pain-free. And honestly, the biggest game changer for me was psychological stress management. And it sounds weird because you think about how can what's going on up here affect all this. It affects it, especially when I started looking in the literature of psychological stress on autoimmune diseases, on pain, on honestly like all-cause mortality, cancer, cardiovascular disease. That this is the great silent killer that nobody talks about. My pain experience, where I really started being in really significant amount of pain, started in 2016 all the way up to about 2022. I still have flare-ups here and there, all the way up to 2022, and that coincided with the most stressful period of my life. And in 2022, I left a very bad relationship, and I remembered about 2 weeks after I left it, I was in the gym and I'm like, why am I so much stronger now? Like within 2 weeks, I got physically stronger. And I'm like, what is happening? And I realized I can recover better because I'm not vibrating all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not spun up all the time. And, again, I'm probably getting into a little bit of woo, some people might say, or call it a personal opinion. But I think it's hard to recover when you are always sending signals to your body that something is wrong, you're in danger.
Yeah.
And unfortunately or fortunately, what helped human beings survive for a long time was we were constantly scanning our environment for threats. We were very good at that. Only now, that same system still scans the environment, but now it's, my spouse hasn't given me attention today, or they said something mean, or, something that aren't life-threatening, but still it spins up that same system.
Your body has the same reaction.
Right. It spins up that same system. And, by the way, like they show this also, I believe, with people as they go up in like affluence and whatnot. Your brain just finds new things to target as threats, to feel as threats, right? And so one of the things I got better at was, okay, there's always going to be things that are stressors, but I can choose how I respond to it in terms of how I talk to myself, like things I can do in terms of breathing, walking outside, honestly, like other things that make a big difference, sleep. So there was a study done where they looked at, it was military individuals, and they had people sleep either 8 hours or 4 hours. And in the 4-hour group, they had a 236% increase in the risk of an acute injury during that time frame.
Yeah.
Because you're under recovered, and that's going to add to your stress burden as well.
Absolutely. And
so also the way you talk to yourself, if you ruminate on an injury or pain, it actually strengthens that response. If you tell yourself, it's almost like you have to view pain as, okay, my body's sending me a signal. It doesn't mean I'm broken. And now the way I talk to myself is I'm strong, I'm resilient. I may be in bad pain now, but I know it can go away. And I mean, I can tell you, like anecdotally, I mean, when I've had flare-ups, I had one in like December, I want to say. And I mean, it was so bad, actually, like I had to just do belt squats for like a week because I couldn't load up the barbell on squats because it hurt too bad. Within 2 weeks, I was completely pain-free. Now, old pain science would say, well, you've got a herniated disc, it's pressing on that nerve, and so that means you just need to stop squatting because it will never resolve itself.
Yeah.
And we just know that's not true.
I mean, the brain is so powerful, and it really, there's actually some burnout literature that like there is actually why we get into burnout is these chronic stress signals that never sort of get resolved, right? So it can be as simple as like you have a stress response, you're not exercising, you're not dealing with the stressor. So it could be as annoying as like someone said something to you, but you're thinking about it, and then instead of like actually dealing with it in a healthy manner, which could be having a good social interaction, which could be working out, which could be sleeping, which could be, you know, a whole host of different things, hugging somebody, kissing them, right? Like with someone you love, like those things all break the stress response cycle. But if you don't actually break them, this is actually from Emily Nagoski's book, but if you don't break them, you're just in this cycle and it gets worse and worse and worse. So you're like drinking a glass of wine, you're scrolling on the internet, you're not dealing with the issue. It's just going to get worse.
Again, like the literature on, like, especially like IBS, for example, if you look at the tie between IBS and psychiatric disorders, it's very strong. This is a proposed mechanism, which is essentially is if you are stressed out all the time, you're spinning up this, you know, defense response. Your body is starting to attack itself. And if you look at the etiology of a lot of these autoimmune diseases, and again, I'm not an autoimmune expert or anything like that, but there are pretty strong ties in most cases to pretty severe psychological stress. And like what you said about dealing with it, what happens in the mind affects the body, and what happens in the body affects the mind. I just covered a new study where they took people who, it was men who had general anxiety disorder and major depressive disorder. They had them resistance train 2 times a week for 25 minutes over 8 weeks. And the decrease in depression was an effect size of 1.7. Now, you know, that's a massive effect size. Like, so just for perspective, an effect size of like 0.2 is considered small. An effect size of 0.5 is considered moderate. Anything above a 0.8 is considered large. SSRIs are anywhere from like 0.3 to 0.5. In best case, they end up around a 0.7, 0.8. So this was like, I mean, again, I don't want to say exercise, don't take SSRIs. That's not the message I'm saying. But what I am saying is what you do with your body affects your mind. And I think for a long time, science did not really embrace this concept. It was like you have physiology and then you have woo-woo psychology that doesn't really matter because they're just your thoughts. No, your thoughts actually matter. Absolutely. In terms of your physiology. You cannot disconnect the two.
Yeah, I mean, in sexual health, we say that your biggest organ for sex is actually your brain. And it totally affects your ability to have pleasure, to have erections in men, have orgasms in women, you know, have the appropriate arousal response. All of that stuff is completely affected by your brain.
Yeah, I believe I was reading something about like men with erectile dysfunction. It might have actually been even your stuff. And something to the effect of a lot of what makes it so bad is the rumination on it and the worry about it and thinking about it so much rather than just kind of like trying to see what happens and take it as it comes. No pun intended. And, you know, but that's, again, like if you hyperfixate on something, it rarely fixes the problem. In most cases, it makes it far worse. And the pain science shows that pretty clearly. Yeah. And that has been my experience as well. I mean, I was 6 weeks out from nationals this past year, and I was squatting. I did 590 for a triple on squats, and on the third rep, I felt my adductor kind of like tweak. I racked the bar, and I was supposed to do some back offsets. I loaded the bar for my back offsets, and I was like, no, not today. So I took it off, and I could kind of tell, went over to belt squats. I'm like, okay, can I do a lightweight? Can I modify my form where it's not, you know, it's okay to, if you look at the literature, it's okay to like touch the pain a little bit, but you just don't want to be like banging against it. So this is what's called exposure therapy, actually. I was able to kind of modify my form. I was able to do that. Within 3 weeks, I had absolutely no pain in my adductor. I was back to squatting heavy. But again, I talked to myself. I said I was focusing on sleep, stress management. I didn't hyperfixate about it. I was like, okay, you know, we've been here before. It'll resolve itself. My body is strong and resilient. And by talking to myself that way, rather than, well, I probably tore something and, you know, this is going to take however long to recover and I'm not going to be ready for nationals and all that. That's possible, but me having those thoughts is going to ensure that happens, right? Yeah. And again, like another game changer for me with pain was what they call exposure therapy, which one of the worst things you can do if you have pain is just stop moving. Like, again, that is when doctors tell people, and it's usually GPs who, quite frankly, they're just not equipped because they don't have the experience with, because how much time they spend on pain
Chronic
science.
pain, yeah.
And so what the idea is, so for example, in probably like 2022, I'd been dealing with hip issues on and off for a long time. And I actually read an article about exposure therapy from a physical therapist. Shout out to Charlie Dixon of Barbell Medicine. And what they said was, okay, find some variation of the exercise you're trying to do that's causing you pain. Try to find some variation, modify the load, modify the range of motion, modify the tempo, see if any of those things can get you to a low enough pain state where it's not making it worse. And so it's kind of like, if you were doing exposure therapy in psychology, if you had like this big fear of spiders, you wouldn't just, if you put somebody in a room with a bunch of spiders,
that's not going to work.
That's not going to help. It's going to be traumatic, right? That would be like me going in and just saying, I'm going to plow through this. I'm going to try and squat normal, and I'm just going to make it worse, right? Because I'm going to hyperfixate on it and I'm going to feel it more. It's going to strengthen that pain connection. And so the idea would be, well, maybe you go into a room and there's a spider in a glass case on the other side of the room. Yeah. And then over time, they move it closer and closer and closer. And then maybe eventually they take the case off, right? And then maybe eventually you're in the room with a couple spiders or whatever. And this is how you get over that fear. So when it comes to lifting, I found that, okay, I can do high, like 6 inches above parallel, pin squat with slow tempo. And I can do that. And I feel it, but it's not making the pain worse. So I started there. Over the course of about 16 weeks, I got back every week. I'd either lower the pins, increase the weight, or both. And sometimes I regressed where, okay, it kind of flared up. I got to walk it back a little bit. But every time I regressed it, it never went back to the original, right? I was always, you got to look at these. It's like the stock market, right? You look at over the course of time. If you zoom in, it may go down. But if you look at over the course of 100 years, it's always going up. So by the end of 16 weeks, I was back squatting full to depth with minimal pain. And this was something I'd struggled with for 2 years. And so that exposure therapy was a huge game changer for me. And then that really got me digging in on more of this pain science. And again, like when you look at the research that shows if you MRI the lower backs of 100 asymptomatic people who are over the age of 40, over half of them will have bulging or herniated discs.
Absolutely.
And then you have garbage can terms like disc degeneration, which, by the way, is literally everyone over the age of, I don't know, 20.
I literally haven't seen an MRI that doesn't have that on it.
Of course.
Never.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
But yeah, I think it's really important because I think what people always want to know is how do you prevent injury? But really, you're not going to prevent injury. You're going to get injured. It's how you manage it when you feel the pain. Like, don't continue to push through and hurt yourself even further. And I think you made some really good points. Is like, try to modify, go lower weight, get to the point where you can do it where it's not as painful and it's manageable and you can slowly work your way back and without pain, right? Because, I also have some hip tear. I have a hip tear. And so sometimes I'll flare up and then I'll be like, okay, I got to go down on my weights and I got to sort of take my time until I feel better again, because it's just it's inevitable that it's going to get injured. We're aging, we're humans, we're wearing and tearing, we're walking all the time. Like, you're going to injure yourself somehow.
Yeah. One of the things people will say to me is they're like, well, it's always been wait till you're older. I'm like, well, I'm 42 now and I'm still, I've deadlifted 717 pounds like 6 weeks ago at Nationals, which was an unofficial M1 world record, which then actually somebody officially broke it at Worlds, so now I got to go break that one. But, I'm like, okay, well, then well, wait till you're 50. I'm like, listen, when you're older, you're going to have pain. There's no way around it. You can be weak and have pain, or you can be strong and have pain. I choose to be strong and have pain, because if you look at the data on longevity, quality of life, it is very, very, past the age of 50, 60, your lean mass is very predictive of your longevity and your quality of life. And being able to be strong is such a huge benefit. I think if more people looked at muscle like they did bone, when they talk about bone, they say, well, you want to build as much bone as you possibly, by the way, there's nothing better for building bone than resistance training, FYI. But you want to build as much as you can, because eventually you start to lose it. It starts to decline. Muscle mass is the same way. Eventually it starts to decline, right? Now you can stave it off. You can, like they say, I think it's like a 0.5% to 1% per year decline after the age of 40 or whatever. Like, I don't think I've really lost any muscle mass yet, but I mean, at some point I'll, probably will start to lose some. Like, it's just how it goes. Right. But if you have more when you start, you're going to have more when you're 80, and I mean, we've seen it. We've seen people in their 80s and 90s lifting. I mean, who is it? Rudy from Kabuki. I think he just deadlifted. He's like 73 or 74 and deadlifted over 500 pounds,
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sure he has pain, but you know what? The pain doesn't stop him from doing stuff because he's so strong.
Yeah. And he probably really understands the value of being strong at 70. Right?
Oh, yeah.
When
you start looking at your peers, I mean, that's one of the, worries I have about my parents is they're getting into their 70s. And, my dad has never really been active. My mom, she's active. She does walks and whatnot, but then she went through some foot injuries and whatnot that made her more sedentary. And so I'm really, I try not to harp too much, but I'm like, hey guys, you gotta, you move it or you lose it. Like, once you hit age 65, man, if you have a fall, you break something, you go into a hospital bed, the likelihood you're getting back out of that, it drops off a cliff after age 65.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have falls that, when they were 40 would have meant, a few weeks in bed and then back out. It ends up being the end of their life because they go to a hospital bed in a hospital, they start getting infections because of all the bed rest, and then it's a steady decline from there.
Yeah, 20% of people, elderly people who have a fall will die within a year.
Yep.
So it is really, really difficult. So let's talk to those people who are in their 65 and above age range. How do you recommend they start?
Anything. I was just talking to a friend about this today because her mom wants to start lifting, and I think she's in her late 60s. And, there was a study done right across the street from where I went to grad school. I was at the Department of Human Nutrition across the street in Fair Hall at the kinesiology department, exercise phys department. They did a study, and it was like basically frail elderly people who had, trouble like standing up from a seated position. They did progressive overload, which was basically like them sitting down to a high, chair. Mm-hmm. But over time, some of these people were like doing full squats by the end of this thing, and they were in their 70s. And what they showed was relative to their starting muscle mass, they gained a similar percentage of muscle mass that young people gain. Now, when you're 70, you have less muscle than somebody who's 20. Yeah. So you gain less absolute mass. By the way, they find the same thing with women too. Women, when they resistance train, gain the same amount of muscle as men as a relative percentage of their starting muscle mass. Now, women have less muscle mass overall, so they gain a less total amount. So what I mean by that, for example, somebody has 60 kilograms of lean mass and they gain 10% over the course of 2 years, they gain 6 kilos. If it's a male who has, 75 kilograms, he's going to gain 7.5 kilograms. Right. So the male has gained more absolute mass, but as a percentage of the starting mass, it's the same. Mm-hmm. And so they find the same thing with elderly. People ask, when is it too late to start lifting weights? It is never too late to start lifting weights. It is never too late to start being active. If you are 80 and you've never lifted weights, go lift the pink dumbbells. Like, I don't care. It will make a huge difference. I mean, there was a video of, I think it was a study out of Australia. There was like 70-year-old women, and some of them were lifting like 150 and even 200 pounds, like deadlifting this. And people were worried about injuries and stuff. It's like, who cares? Like, okay, maybe maybe their back hurts a little bit. They can stand up.
Their back was going to hurt anyway.
Their back was going to hurt anyway. I mean, I tell people all the time, like, my dad had sciatica. My dad sat in a chair all day,
Yeah.
When you're old, you have pain. You can be weak and have pain, or you can be strong and have pain.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. I mean, I took my parents have actually been very active, but in the South Asian community, my parents' generation don't exercise, right? They might go for a walk. Right. Maybe if you're lucky, they might walk.
Their lifestyle was active.
Right. Yeah. No, but they used to actually go to the gym. And my mom has gone but COVID brought them down because they stopped working out during COVID. Now they're back at it finally. But I had to really push my dad because I was like, look, like you used to go to the gym, you used to lift weights. Like, so last time I went home, I took him with me to the gym and I said, look, just start. I'll put you on low weights. Like, let's just do my workout with me. And he did it. And I was like, I called him and I'm like, are you still doing it? And he's like, yeah, I'm still doing it. And I was like, you just, if you're a young person, take your parents with you. Like that might be all they need. Is just someone to show them how to use the machine or show them how to use a dumbbell and
or hire a personal trainer who works with that population. They're out there. And I mean, the thing is, if people knew how little it takes to get most of the benefits, they would yes, they'll see me like I train 2-3 hours a day. That's because I'm literally trying to be the strongest human for my weight class at my age in the world, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're just looking to build some muscle, be functional, 30 minutes 2-3 times a week, 80% of I'm making up numbers here, but you're getting the vast majority of the benefits from that. And do machines. Do machines. Start with the lightest plate. Do some reps. Next week, take it up 5 pounds and just keep doing that until it gets hard and you can't do more repetitions. Try to get to the point where you can do more repetitions and then add more weight. It is literally that simple.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Quick break from this episode to let you know I am so grateful that you're spending part of your day with me. I started creating content online to empower people to learn more about their bodies without needing to go see a doctor, pay a copay, wait in a waiting room, or find parking. And it has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. If you want to help support our mission of providing free education, please consider joining our premium membership. There you will have access to ad-free episodes, which are released early, as well as free transcripts and the opportunity to ask me anything. And these questions are answered in our monthly AMA episodes. Support the show and join today at renamalik.supercast.com. Can't wait to see you there. One of my audience asked me, is there a benefit to powerlifting over regular weightlifting in terms of general health?
Probably not. I mean, the benefit is I think it's fun.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've always told people, if you are strong and you don't have pain, like if you can lift heavy and you don't have pain, it's fun. I used to work with a lot of bikini competitors, and a lot of them would come to me because they developed eating disorders. They had a lot of body dysmorphia. They were hyperfixated on their physique. And I found, if I can get them strong, they start focusing on the numbers on the bar rather than what the number on the scale is. And they actually end up getting better results because they weren't who knows, but spun up all the time. Mm-hmm. But also they weren't stressed out so much. They were focusing on training hard. To this day, I've never come across a person who, if I got them to be able to squat heavy or deadlift heavy, didn't enjoy that if they were doing it, without pain. And so, I think it's fun, but do I think it's no. And if you don't enjoy that type of lifting, then absolutely don't do it.
Yeah.
You should, for the average person, exercise is like diet. Pick whatever you enjoy and you can be consistent with. Somebody asked me one time, I had a client, this is probably 2015. They said, well, I like CrossFit, but I want to build muscle. Is CrossFit the best muscle? I'm like, well, if I was drawing it up on paper, no, but it might be the best muscle building workout for you, because if I put you on a bodybuilding workout and you hate it, you find it boring and you don't do it, or you don't work hard at it, or you don't look forward to it, then you're not going to build as much muscle as you would with something where you're excited to go in and do it and you're going to be super consistent with it and work hard at it. So I still think compliance is the science, even when it comes to exercise and building muscle. Now, if you can, I tell people big rocks first, right? Big rocks is being consistent. If you can do that, and then now you want to worry about some techniques or whatever else for muscle building, then that's different. But I think for most people, the problem is that, I always tell people, I'm like, be honest with yourself. The problem isn't that you didn't have the right sets and reps. It's not that you didn't have the perfect protein, carbon, fat breakdown. It's just that you just stopped doing what you were supposed to be doing. You just did not execute consistently. I have yet to find someone who, if you inject them with truth serum, that they didn't get good results if they were brutally consistent for years at a time.
Yeah.
If you do that, it is really hard to not get results.
Because I think people get really hung up on the minutia, right? Like how many reps should I do? What weight should I be lifting? Should I be doing back offsets? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Ultimately do something. Start, be consistent, and then you can start sort of dialing in and see what works best for you and experiment and talk to experts, right? Yeah. But I think ultimately get the first, as you said, the first boulder and like just go.
Despite my social media persona, I'm actually a pretty nice guy if you meet me in the gym. And people, like I do have people come up to me pretty often. But years ago, there was a guy at a gym who was kind of an asshole, where he was asking questions but he didn't really want your answer. He just wanted you to validate whatever he was already doing. Mm-hmm. But, I'd watch this guy train, and he was training for powerlifting. But I'm like, you're not really training hard, And he would ask me all these questions. And one day I finally said, hey, man, can I be really honest with you? He's like, yeah. I'm like, dude, the reason you're not getting strong is not because you're not picking the right exercises or your periodization. Like, you're just not pushing yourself. This goes for anything in life, but my coach, Zach Robinson, said this. He said, adaptation is never comfortable. If you are trying to grow muscle, if you're trying to get stronger, your body, that is an expensive process. That requires a lot of physiological energy to do that. Your body is not going to willingly do it unless you force it to do it, right? Unless you apply such stress to your body that it goes, ooh, didn't like that. Going to have to make sure we're better next time. And so most people don't like discomfort. It's hard for them. And the same thing applies with, God, like I can apply it to almost anything. Like even like me going to therapy and talking about relationships. My therapist is, one of the people in my life who I really value, who tells me the truth and will tell me, hey, like you need to do these things, like you need to journal every day and you need to be actively using your boundaries and you need to speak up when something bothers you and all this kind of stuff that's really hard and uncomfortable. But, and then my best friend, he had a great line about boundaries. Because he's like, this guy's like the best with boundaries of anybody I've ever seen. But doing it like in a kind way, right? But he said, dude, I don't like putting up boundaries. I don't like doing that stuff. But I know what happens down the road if I don't.
Right.
And I just know that it's going to be way worse down the road if I just go, it'll be fine. Because it won't. And my friend John Deloney says conflict delayed is conflict amplified. But it also goes to building muscle or getting smarter. Like if you're trying to learn a new surgical technique, I'm sure it's very uncomfortable. You like to do what is you're used to.
Yeah.
Because that's how our human brains are designed. But that is what allows you to push further. Yeah. And so, I think you have to ride a little bit of enough comfort that you don't feel like you're in chaos, right? Mm-hmm. But enough discomfort that you are continuing to progress. Yeah. And it's a fine line to walk.
It is a fine line because we know like when you stress yourself too much, you could start doing harm. But it should be uncomfortable, right? Like if you're getting to failure, anyone who's gone to failure knows it's really fucking hard, right? Like It's not easy. Yep. And if you want those changes, you're going to have to push. And I can tell you there's so many times where I'm like, I'm good. Yeah. Right? And then there's times where like you push yourself harder. And it just depends on maybe that day you're not in the zone, but like you just got to push yourself.
A friend sent me a meme the other day, which was something like the person was praying and Jesus was talking to him. It's like, you could have done a few more reps on that set. And I was like, my problem is Jesus would be saying, you shouldn't have done those extra reps on that set, right? Like, for me, when I was young, I got fortunate that I got exposed to a culture of people in natural bodybuilding who it was very much like the shield of honor that you wore was how hard could you push yourself? How much could you take? How much discomfort could you handle? I used to take it as a personal insult if anybody wanted to train legs with me. And I'm like, well, you're going to puke today, and just like went through some hellacious workouts that looking back, I'm like, all right, this is too much. And it was not the best thing overall, but it was good because it taught me how to really tolerate that discomfort. And it's interesting when you bring people in who are untrained. Brad Schoenfeld just published a study on this. He's like the guru of hypertrophy research. Took untrained people and had them do a 1 rep max, and then had them do reps with 30% of that 1 rep max. And there was a spread. So 30% of 1 rep max is like nothing.
Yeah.
Like, so for me, if my 1 rep max is, 650 pounds on squat, or let's just take deadlift, around 700, 30% is 210 pounds. I mean, I would probably blow my lungs out before I'd actually hit true failure taking that deadlift to failure, right?
Yeah.
But I'm trained. So on, I think it was like shoulder press, the spread was between like 2 reps and like, I don't know, 70 reps or something like that, right?
2.
I might have butchered it, but I know one of them was like 2 reps to 70. And then like lat pull downs, like 4 reps to over 100 or something like that. And I commented and I said, this is an effect of untrained people not knowing how to push themselves.
Yeah.
Because they'll do reps to discomfort. They won't do reps to true failure. Well, the ones going to 70, 80, 100 reps, they were actually doing it, right? But like, so you're telling me, all right, let's take shoulder press, for example, to compare apples to apples. My max dumbbell shoulder press is probably like I don't know, if I was going to do a 1 rep max, probably like 120, 125 pounds, maybe 130. So 30% of that would be like, 40 pounds. You're telling me 2 reps? Like, no. Like, no. It'd be a lot of reps, Yeah. And so, again, I think learning how to tolerate discomfort with training was really critical, and I'm very grateful that at a very young age I got exposed to that and learned how to push myself, because it is a skill. It is a skill to learn how to push yourself. And I'm sure you found that with like studying, and I mean your resume was extremely impressive. It's not like you just know how to study, right? And know how to push that. I mean, I remember my first organic chemistry test, I got a D on. I don't think I'd ever had a D on a science test before in my life. And I studied for it. Like I didn't blow it off or anything like that. I didn't do it last minute. I studied for it. And I went to my organic chemistry professor. I said, listen, I'm not here to complain about my grade. I deserve this grade, but I want you to know I did really study for this. And I just, like, obviously I don't want to get another D. And he goes, well, you may have studied for it, but what you think you need to really master this versus what you actually need, you're going to have to step it up. You're going to have to do something different than you've done before. And he goes, oh, by the way, I didn't see you come to my office hours. I didn't see you in the study groups, and it was like, I'd never done that stuff before. So now I was in the office hours every time he had office hours. Tuesday and Thursday I was in office hours, and I was in the study groups, right? And then next test, 99, third test, 90, And so, that was, again, I had to fail, didn't really fail, but got close. And so that taught me, now I have to learn a new skill to push further beyond, but it was uncomfortable, meant there was a lot of my friends who were in business classes, they were like, hey, Layne, we're going to go play volleyball, after all the classes were over. I'm like, well, I got lab, I got to go. I'll see you guys later. And then, it's Saturday night, everybody's out partying, and I got my fair share of partying in college, but there were some Saturday nights where I'm like, well, I'm studying tonight because I got orgo test on Tuesday.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and you have to be uncomfortable. That's just the bottom line. For anything in life where you want to push yourself to learn a new skill, to do something new, whatever it is, you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be bad at it, right? Like whatever it is, whether it's studying, like learning how to knit, learning how to do anything, any skill that you want to learn, it's going to be bad and it's going to be hard. Social media is another example of that. I mean, some of these I see all the time when a new platform pops up. People go, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, okay, well, people said that about Facebook, Instagram. Like, okay, you might be ended up holding the bag here. You know, like you never know when the next thing that's going to pop is. And so, like for me, I tell people, like, if something comes up, I'm going to check it out. And I'm going to, I may not make it my focus, but I'm going to understand how it works because who knows? Yeah. You never know. I mean, like Vines, for example, was big back in the day, but it was too early for its time. But those creators, like now, would be killing it. I want to switch gears a little bit to nutrition.
Yep.
So let's just start, like most people who are listening to this either want to lose weight or gain muscle, right? So let's explain the basics, because like we talked about earlier in this talk, there's people trying to sell like, oh, if you eat this coconut oil or you eat this specific diet, that's going to burn more calories and you're going to do better. But there's some sort of basic tenets, right? Basal metabolic rate, energy expenditure, calories. Let's explain that to the audience so they sort of understand.
At the end of the day, when you eat, you are ingesting carbon skeletons with some other stuff on it. And your body has to do something with those carbon skeletons. They don't flutter off into oblivion. And you are not creating carbons out of nothing. You are not a perpetual motion machine. You do not violate the laws of physics. And, my favorite is when people say, well, humans aren't bomb kilometers. Actually, we kind of are. So did you know when they discovered the Atwater values and whatnot, it's so funny. They calculate I think there's two kinds of intelligence. There's people like me who I can read about something, learn it, and then teach it. And then there's people who make this shit up just like Newton, Einstein, and people who came up with the idea of a bomb kilometer, which is basically a bomb kilometer, just to give background, is how they determine how many calories are in a food. And calories are literally units of energy. Okay, so energy, calories, completely interchangeable. You can use the two terms interchangeably. And so they're burning a piece of food and it gives off heat, and then that heat has an energy value, which is the calories. And then there's water surrounding this chamber, and that water will increase in temperature based on how much energy is in that food, right? People say, well, we're not bomb kilometers. Okay, well, you oxidize food, you burn, your body gives off heat and energy, and oh, by the way, those come out as carbon dioxide and water in your urine. We can trace all this stuff. This is not magic. We know what's happening. So when people say, I ate in a calorie deficit, I didn't lose weight. No, you didn't. Maybe you ate in what you thought was a calorie deficit. Maybe you ate in what probably should have been a calorie deficit. But if you didn't lose weight and when I say lose weight, here's the other part of that. People weigh in sporadically they weigh like in the morning one day, and then a week later they weigh in the afternoon. They go, oh, look, I gained 2 pounds. Calorie deficits don't work. No. You caught a weight fluctuation. Mm-hmm. When I say lose weight, I mean, if you don't, on average, decrease your body mass over the course of time, you were not in a calorie deficit. Right. So calories in, calories out is the rule. Okay. It's the law. Now, why are people confused by that? Well, the first thing is people, when you hear calories in, calories out, I think a lot of people take that very personally because they feel like there's judgment, there's like a value judgment attached to that, right?
Yeah.
You are eating too much. Take away the self-imposed shame and blame and just try to look at it objectively. If you gained body fat, then you did eat too much for your given level of total daily energy expenditure. Okay? So calories in is how much potential energy in the chemical bonds of the food we eat. That's calories in. The metabolizable energy, because like, for example, insoluble fiber, not really metabolizable energy. The calories outside of things is how much the totality of the energy you expend on a daily basis. And that is broken up into a few different parts. So people use metabolic rate and energy expenditure interchangeably. They're not the same. Metabolic rate is part of your total daily energy expenditure. And for most of us, it's the biggest portion. And so metabolic rate, or it's called resting metabolic rate, basal metabolic rate, resting energy expenditure. There's subtle differences in how each are measured, but it's essentially the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's the cost of keeping the lights on. It's if you're just laying down, doing absolutely nothing, how much energy do you burn over 24 hours? That's your metabolic rate. So that's a chunk. Then you have your physical activity, which you can put into two buckets, purposeful and non-purposeful. Mm-hmm. So purposeful is exercise, right? And non-purposeful is something we call NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is actually a large portion of what we burn on a daily basis. So for example, you're twirling that pen right now, mm-hmm. right? I'm waving my hands around as I talk. Those would fall into the buckets of NEAT because I'm not Well, now I am because I'm thinking about it, but I'm typically not thinking about those things. So fidgeting, pacing, like for example, when I take phone calls, I usually am pacing around without even realizing it. If I'm posting stuff on social media, I'm usually pacing around when I do it. I tend to be a fidgety person. That actually ends up being a decent amount of the energy that you burn per day, and actually ends up being very modifiable, which I'll get to in a minute. So some people, and this may sound pedantic, but it's important to understand the difference. Some people might say, well, I'm going to go take the stairs today and get my NEAT up. No, if you've decided to do it, it's now exercise. It's not NEAT. NEAT is completely unconscious movement. And the reason it's important is NEAT is probably one of the biggest determinants of whether somebody is obese prone or obese resistant phenotype. People who are obese prone, if they overeat, they don't compensate by spontaneously increasing their energy expenditure. But obese resistant phenotypes, if they overeat, they tend to just compensate by, without even realizing it, they increase their energy expenditure. In fact, there's a classic study from 1995 by Levine, where they overfed, I think it was, I might butcher the details of the study, but the crux will be correct. I think they overfed them by like 1,000 calories a day for like 8 weeks, something like that. And, they should have gained, something like, 7-8 kilos of body fat. Mm-hmm. But the spread was like over 8 kilos to 0.8 kilos, something like that.
Wow.
Right? So one person almost didn't gain anything despite overeating by 1,000 calories. And they found that this person just spontaneously increased their energy expenditure without even realizing it. They just moved more without even realizing it. And so that's kind of that obese resistant phenotype. But again, that is a subconscious, unconscious thing. It's not like you can, people, I think because it's in the bucket of physical activity, people put it as it's in your control. That portion of it is not. It's not in your control. Now, you can compensate by doing more purposeful activity if you want. Mm-hmm. But again, it's purposeful. And then the other final kind of bucket for our total daily energy expenditure is what's called the thermic effect of food, which is you need to put in energy in to get energy out of the food you eat. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to generalize because it's probably very food specific. But fats, for example, if you eat 100 calories from fat, your TEF is like 0 to 3%. So your net 97 to 100 calories. If you eat carbohydrate, it's like 5 to 10%. So you net 90, 95 calories. And if it's protein, it's like 20, 30%. So you net 70, 80 calories. Now, TEF only ends up accounting for a couple hundred calories of energy expenditure in total per day. So it's not this massive bucket. But again, those are kind of the four things that contribute to your total daily energy expenditure. Mm-hmm. So how does this become confusing? Well, people in general, the first one is tracking errors. Mm-hmm. And this is the biggest one. And this is the one that people hate to hear about because they go, no, I know I'm tracking right. And then I'm like, oh yeah? Weigh every single thing you eat for a week and let me know what happens. And usually 75% of the time, if they actually do it, what happens is they come back and they go, I lost 2 pounds. It's like, yeah, because you stopped snacking. Because I told you to weigh every single thing you were eating and you got much more mindful about what you were putting in your mouth. Just like if you start keeping a budget, you spend less money because you are very mindful about where your dollars are going. That which gets monitored gets adjusted. And we know this to be true in science. If you monitor it, it changes behavior right down to electrons. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle, I believe, is that one. They noticed that when they monitor, it's photons. When they monitored these photons, they changed behavior. So that applies across the board and certainly up to humans, right? So tracking errors, even I had somebody reach out to me one time, and I'll never forget this conversation. They were like, I'm eating 1,600 calories a day. I am tracking everything. I dug into it a little bit more. It turns out they were doing volume measurements, right? So they're doing scoops, quarter cups, whatever. I said, do me a favor, just weigh it out. Do everything you're doing, just weigh it out. One day later, they came back. They said, oh my God, I'm eating 2,700 calories a day.
That's crazy, that difference.
But think about it. If you do a volume measurement, if you ever want to be depressed, weigh out a serving of peanut butter.
I know. It's so depressing.
It is not a tablespoon, okay?
No, it's not.
It's
really
like,
not.
if you take a tablespoon and you completely level it, yeah, then there you go, right? And so I think a lot of people just eyeball stuff. Or they go, I had a bowl of cereal. A serving of cereal is usually 3/4 of a cup to a cup. It'll usually barely cover the bottom of a bowl. of a modern bowl. Because, oh, by the way, in the 1800s, dinner plates were this big, and now they're this big. Yeah. And they keep getting bigger, right? Bowls, the same thing. I have like bowls in my cabinet that are this big around. Like if I put a serving of cereal in there, I'm going to look at that and go, well,
that's like 4 servings.
Right. You have a bowl of ice cream. It's like 2 or 3 servings.
Yeah.
Right?
I weighed out my ice cream the other day and it was really depressing.
Yeah.
It was really depressing.
Exactly. And so, I mean, just go, like if you go to a restaurant, now that they have calories on there, look at the menu. Mm-hmm. Cheesecake Factory.
It's a full day's out.
Go look at every single salad at Cheesecake Factory. They're all over 1,000 calories for a salad. Yeah. Okay. So people believe they're eating low calories, but they're not. And we see this in the research literature. In fact, again, a classic study in nutrition in 1992 published in the New England Journal of Medicine. They brought people in. They recruited specifically people who reported being weight loss resistant, could not lose weight on 1,200 calories a day. They required this for people to actually be in the study. I think it was about 12 people. And they told them, we're going to be able to track everything you eat. If you underreport, we will know. And they underreported by an average of 53%.
Wow.
And some of them even argued with the researchers afterwards. And it's like, no, we have objective data on this. And they looked at their BMRs and their total daily energy expenditure, their lean mass. And what was really interesting is so many people focus on the metabolism side of obesity. We have known for years, obese people on average do not have slower metabolisms than lean people. In fact, on an absolute ratio, they have faster metabolisms. This is very consistent in the literature. Now, when you standardize for lean mass, they've about the same, maybe still a little bit faster. And that applies to type 2 diabetics as well. This applies for obese, non-obese, type 2 diabetics, non-type 2 diabetics. 80% of the variance in BMR is explained by lean mass. You can almost draw, and in this study, they did it. You can draw a straight line through lean mass and their BMR. And I think the biggest variation from what was predicted was like 30 calories. And I actually think that the person had a 30 calorie faster per day BMR. But by the way, 30 calories, like that is within the detection limits of that equipment. Okay. Like it's not really different. Okay. Right. So they showed they didn't have slower metabolisms. They were underreporting their food intake by 53%, and they overreported their physical activity by 47%. But this shouldn't surprise anybody. Americans underreport their debt by 150% because we're main characters and we're the heroes of our story, right?
Yep.
And we don't like that. A lot of people don't like that accountability, shining on them, right? And so we lie to ourselves about serving sizes, whatever. But if you could just embrace the fact that accountability is freedom, if it was in your power, people tie fault and responsibility together. There's a lot of things that play into obesity. I used to be one of these people who was like, okay, if you're obese, you're just lazy. I no longer think that, because how many examples do we need of obese people who are very successful in some area of their life? Mm-hmm. And so there's, of course, the food environment, big thing, trauma, stress, lifestyle, environmental factor. It could be dozens, if not hundreds of inputs that are coming together to fuel this. But it may not be your fault, but it's still going to be your responsibility to make the changes in order to lose weight. So again, I think a lot of people hear that data underreporting and they go, you're calling me a liar. I don't think that people are necessarily lying. I just think that people don't have a good idea of what portion sizes are. And if you've never weighed, and I'm not saying you have to weigh every single thing for the rest of your life. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's good to go through and give your diet an audit every once in a while, right? Just like your budget. Right?
Yeah.
Go through and give it an audit. If you're having trouble losing weight, just for 1 week, weigh out every single thing you put in your mouth. I'll be shocked if you don't lose weight that week. Or you'll realize, wow, I was eating a lot more than I thought I was. So that's the biggest reason why people get confused. The next one is they overestimate how many calories they burn per day, by far. I mean, these watches, I'll post a screenshot of my watch at the end of a workout, mostly so people can see the time and my heart rate, but then it shows calories on there. This is not correct. Because if it was correct, I'd be losing weight like this. like I would be losing so much weight.
You'd be disappearing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I know what my BMR is because I've had it measured before. It's like 1,900 calories per day. Well, this is telling me that I burn 2,000 calories in my workout. So that's 3,900 calories per day, not even including TEF or any kind of NEAT. Mm-hmm. So I should be like 4,500 calories a day. I maintain my weight on 3,300 calories a day. So it's obviously wrong. And I'll tell people, what do you think is more likely? That you are violating the laws of thermodynamics, or that maybe your watch is not accurate?
Yeah.
Or your treadmill or your bike or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
So none of those things are real accurate. There was a meta-analysis back in 2018, I want to say, that showed that most of these wrist-worn devices overestimated calories burned from exercise by anywhere from 28 to 93%.
93%.
So yeah. So, you burned 2,000 calories? No, it was probably more like 1,000 to 1,400, something like that. So that's another way that people miss it. And online calculators. People go on, they punch in their data, and it says, eat this to lose weight. And then they eat that and they don't lose weight. And I'll say, again, what do you think is more likely? That you are violating the laws of thermodynamics, or that maybe that was not accurate for you? Because maybe it's accurate for 60, 70% of the population. Maybe you're a little bit of an outlier. And also, like people with long dieting history, metabolic adaptation, people will say, well, I'm eating this amount of calories and I'm stuck losing weight. Well, they've been dieting for, 12 weeks or whatever it is. And we know that your BMR can drop by, 15% above what you would predict based on the amount of weight you lose. Mm-hmm. And also your NEAT, we know that losing 10% of your body weight, your NEAT can drop by 400 to 500 calories a day. So let me give you a real life example. So I maintain my body weight on 3,300 calories a day. If I go to 2,700 calories, that's a pretty good deficit for me. But again, my BMR, 1,900, let's just say 2,000 for easy numbers. If I lose 10% of my body weight and my BMR drops 15%, that's 300 calories down, right there. If I lose 400 calories from NEAT, that's 400 plus 300, 700 calories. So what started as a deficit for me is now maintenance, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that really confuses some people. People think calories in, calories out are these independent variables that don't affect each other. No, they are interdependent variables. One affects the other. And there's actually evidence that calories out also affects calories in, right? It's kind of the constrained energy expenditure model of obesity. Or not obesity, but just like constrained energy expenditure model. So all these things come into play that confuse people. But again, you aren't creating carbons out of nothing. I don't care about your hormones. I don't care. Yes, there are hormones like thyroid hormone that can reduce your energy expenditure, but nobody came out of a concentration camp in World War II obese. No one, not a single person. They all came out frail, almost starved to death. When you put it in tight constraints, it doesn't play. Again, yeah, like people bring up, what about hormones? Well, there's really only one hormone, really, that makes a big divot in energy expenditure, and that's thyroid hormone. But again, I have people all the time, well, my hormone's out of whack. Oh, really? What did your blood work say? Oh, you haven't had it measured. Oh, I find this a lot. They'll blame hormones blanketly. Well, why haven't you had it measured? Well, they haven't had it measured because if they had it measured and it was normal, they no longer have an excuse. Or if they had it measured and it was abnormal, now you can get it fixed. And again, there's not an excuse anymore. And I say this with as much love in my heart as I can, because I understand people confuse simple with easy. Yes, the mechanical of weight loss, you must burn more calories than you consume, is simple. That does not make it easy. Just like in order to save money, you have to earn more than you spend. I don't think there's a person on this planet who would debate that. I think I read something that like 70 or 80% of Americans can't write a $5,000 check. So, yeah. And that there's plenty of people who make over six figures who are dead broke or are deeply in debt. But they know the information. They know that. Well, so why can't they just save money? Well, because obviously spending habits are tied up in habits and behavior. Just like food is not an equation. It is our entire life. people want to talk about food as if it's like this, just like the X's and O's are what's important. No, it's behavior modification, lifestyle modification. If you talk to people who were formerly obese, who lost weight and kept it off, they changed their life looks completely different now than it did before. So many people say they want results, but what they really want is to get results while still being able to drag all their bad habits and behaviors behind them. And you're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. You might get results in the short term, but you're not going to get them in the long term unless you change your lifestyle, which facilitates the calorie deficit in order to enable you to lose weight. So I realize I just gave a very, very long-winded explanation for that, but I've heard all the arguments counter to it, and I just want to touch on one more. People say, well, again, hormones, big thing. In research, the biggest decrease in metabolic rate that I have seen from any hormone is thyroid. The biggest documented decrease I've seen in metabolic rate is 25%, okay? Which is, I mean, that's pretty big. So let's take, a lot of females, that are around normal size, probably have BMR around 1200, something like that. Okay, so you're talking about chopping off 300 calories from there. That's a good chunk. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you can't lose weight. It just means it's going to be more difficult for you if it's left untreated. But you can treat it. But then they kind of put this nebulous like hormones, like, the sex hormones. There's some evidence that like if you have an estrogen drop, that replacing that estrogen can increase your energy expenditure. But we're talking 50 to 100 calories a day. None of these things stop metabolism from working. There are no 0-calorie burners. That's called being dead, right? There is just a certain level of calories that you have to burn to be able to live and stay alive. And so when people say, I ate 1,000 calories per day and I didn't lose weight, it's very, very unlikely. It's very unlikely. Is it possible? I guess if somebody was very, very small and didn't move much, I guess it's possible. But then why are they trying to lose weight if they're so small?
Yeah, I mean, their basal metabolic rate would have to be like 1,000 calories, right?
Right. I mean, again, when you go in and you look at type 2 diabetics, obese people, they do not have slower metabolic rates. They do not have less energy expenditure. If anything, on an absolute amount, they have more.
So in terms of basal metabolic rate, you mentioned lean mass will increase your basal metabolic rate. So is that is that the only modifiable factor that we have? And what proportion are you talking about in terms of increasing lean mass and changing metabolic rate?
So muscle mass burns at rest a lot less than a lot of other lean tissues. So your liver is probably one of the most metabolically active organs. Mm-hmm. And they do show people with like bigger, more liver tissue have higher metabolic rates. And then your splanchnic tissues in general, like your gut and liver, they're very metabolically active because they have a lot of turnover. Your cardiac tissue is pretty metabolically active, but they're all much smaller on an absolute level than your skeletal muscle mass. Your skeletal muscle mass, take for example, liver, I think, has an absolute turnover rate of like 30-40% per day. That's a lot of turnover. And I could have butchered that. So if anybody out there knows the citation and I'm wrong, please feel free to correct me. Muscle mass turns over about 1% per day. Very, for a lean tissue, relatively slow. But you have a lot of muscle mass relative to your other lean tissues. So if you add more lean tissue, yes, you will get more BMR. And in fact, I think a lot of even the variance, so I say, BMR is 80% of the variance is explained by lean mass. I think the variances outside of that are probably explained by the relative ratios of some of those lean tissues therein, right?
And those are probably not modifiable in any real way.
Yeah,
I mean, if it gets larger, that's actually sometimes a negative
yeah,
thing. Right?
I'm not sure of the downstream implications of like increasing my liver mass. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, maybe that's, typically alcoholics actually are pretty skinny, so maybe there is an increase in energy expenditure, but not in a good way that you would want, right? So muscle mass, I think the calculation is it burns like 6 calories more per pound at rest. Well, okay, you add 10 pounds of muscle, that's 60 calories per day. It doesn't really seem like a whole lot for all that effort. But I think you're also leaving out people when they build muscle, they're using it more often. And so you're probably also burning a lot more during exercise sessions, walking around per day, just existing. We do know that skeletal muscle mass has, because of the turnover, when you exercise, yes, you build more, but actually the process of protein turnover, when you resistance train, you actually increase muscle protein synthesis, but you also increase muscle protein breakdown. Now, synthesis exceeds breakdown. That's why you build muscle. But that increase in breakdown is actually important for the remodeling of the muscle tissue. And even if you're staying the same amount of muscle tissue, if you're constantly having remodeling, that's still energetically expensive. And there's still value in that because you're increasing the quality of that tissue. And so, I think the straight down the line answer is increasing muscle mass is not going to ramp up your metabolism that much. But I think the practical answer is probably increases it by a good amount in terms of total daily energy expenditure. So I do think building muscle on the long term is helpful for increasing your energy expenditure. But I actually think exercise is most helpful for weight loss, not because of the calories you burn, but because of the appetite regulation side of things. And we do know now, we spent decades focused on the metabolism side. And then for 1 decade, we've really focused on the appetite side, and the whole game changed, right? Now we have these GLP-1 mimetics. We have things like Mounjaro, which I think is GLP-1 and GIP as well. Like it's multiple gut hormones. And we found them. Like we found the stuff that fixes the problem, basically. Like I know people don't like to hear this, but like it works. I mean, I think Mounjaro is like 20% body weight loss on average. I mean, that is massive.
Yeah.
It's been so funny to watch the fitness industry's response to this, which has mostly been negative. And me going, weren't you guys the same one that were selling fat burners that don't work? But somehow this is cheating, And the response, well, they could just eat less. Yeah, thanks. How has that been working out so far for most people? Like it's not obviously that simple. So exercise helps with appetite regulation because there's quite a bit of research to show that it increases your sensitivity to satiety signals. Probably a better way to look at it is being sedentary actually dysregulates your appetite response. So there's a very classic study in Bengali workers in the 1950s, and they looked at sedentary, lightly active, moderately active, and then like heavy labor jobs. And what they found was like a J-shaped curve. So from lightly active to heavily active, they pretty much perfectly compensated their energy. They all maintained their body weight, and they kind of like their appetite went up in concert with how much they were expending. But when they were sedentary, they ate more than lightly active, and I think they ate a little bit more than the moderately active as well. So being sedentary, 1, dysregulates your appetite, and 2, when you're just sitting around all day, well, what do you have time for?
Yeah,
you can think about food. And I think one of the other things I really try to harp on people, appetite's important, for sure. And I like that they call it appetite because appetite and hunger are actually defined differently. Hunger is a physiological response. Appetite incorporates biopsychosocial. So appetite is the compulsion to eat, not just physiological hunger. Because Rena, I want you to think about, can you remember the last time you were actually like hungry when you ate a meal?
No.
Right. Because we eat based on kind of a rhythm, right? And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like you can obviously you maintain a lean body mass, I maintain a lean body mass, just kind of doing the modern thing of eating so often. But most people don't eat out of hunger. That's not why people eat. People eat for a lot more reasons than just hunger. When was the last time you went to a social gathering that didn't have food? You probably can't remember.
Yeah.
Right? When was the last time you went out with friends and it didn't involve food? When was the last time you had a work event that didn't have food? Right? Like the food, drink, we can wring our hands about how it's been interwoven into society, but we're not putting the bullet back in the gun. Right? And I see the same thing with ultra-processed, hyper-palatable foods. People say, well, if we could just get rid of them. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Okay. Could they legislate out ultra-processed foods tomorrow? Sure. And they'd also put hundreds of thousands of people out of work. And you'd have different problems. Like I said, no solutions. There's only trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, that's not going to happen. You're not putting the bullet back in the gun. Because you're not going to close down a bunch of Fortune 500 companies overnight. Like, it's just not going to happen, right? Yeah. So we have to live in the reality of things, which maybe that involves some people, especially people who are obese prone, who do not compensate their energy expenditure well, who have poorer appetite regulation, who perhaps have trauma and food has become a coping skill, that GLP-1 mimetics are something that they need as kind of a starting point to get better. But I'm also a big fan of medication with lifestyle intervention. Okay? Because if you're eating a crappy diet and you just go to eating less of a crappy diet, it's still a crappy diet, right? Because you're not getting enough fiber, micronutrients, all those sorts of things. So I'm a fan of GLP-1 mimetics for people who need it, plus lifestyle intervention. They go hand in hand. It doesn't have to be either or. It can be both and. And I think that's really where I've everything becomes so polarized on social media. And you've got obesity doctors they're kind of like poo-pooing, exercise and nutrition and whatnot. It doesn't
Hopefully
work.
not. Are they really doing that?
Some of the, well, I don't want to say not poo-pooing it as in it's like unhealthy, but they're saying, well, look, long-term weight loss doesn't work. You got these kind of, they're more of like the anti-diet, healthy at every size, body movement, body positivity movement. Not saying that entire group of people does it, but more of the fringe kind of does that.
Yeah.
And say, well, research shows you can't lose weight and keep it off. You can. It's difficult, but obviously you can because it has been done. Therefore, it can be done.
But it requires dramatic lifestyle change, like you
Absolutely.
said, right? So that means like maybe changing your friend group, maybe changing your partner, like whatever it is. But like you need to be around people who are also living that lifestyle. You
just bring up a great point because I'm thinking of a systematic review of successful weight loss maintainers written by a gal named Marie Spreckley from Oxford in 2020. And they interviewed, so they did a quantitative analysis and a qualitative analysis of people who successfully lost weight and kept it off. I believe it was for at least 3 years. Could have been 5, but it was at least 3. And they found a lot of what you just said. They found that they had that their friends group changed. Not necessarily purposefully, but just in a practical manner. 2 things tend to happen. One, your friends who, if they're also overweight or obese and you start losing weight, they may feel insecure about that and try to kind of pull you back. Why are you doing that? Why can't you enjoy this? What are you trying to prove? Do you think you're better than us? That sort of thing. And plus, now because you're somebody who's taking care of your health, you're trying to go to the gym, you just don't have as much in common with those folks anymore, and you end up aligning more with people who are doing the things that you do in your life. And that is painful. Even if it's a growth thing, losing friends that you valued is painful. I'm sure there are people who were overweight or obese who lost weight who still have obese friends. I'm not saying you got to get rid of your friends group. I'm just saying it's going to be hard to go to the same places and do the same things as you were doing, Pizza Monday, Taco Tuesday, Happy Hour Wednesday. It'd be hard to keep doing those things if you want to lose weight and keep it off.
I think that's true for any change in life, right? As you become more focused on your business or as you become more focused on your kids, like you're not going to hang out with your single friends as much, or you're not going to hang out with people who don't think about their businesses all the time because you can't relate to their issues as much as you can relate to other people who have those same issues. That's
exactly right. And they also identified one of the biggest predictors of success was social support from a spouse or friends. And I want to be very clear, support in the form of not feedback. Do not give feedback to your friends trying to lose weight. They do not need your feedback. What they need social support wise is saying, I know it's hard, but you can do it. Look how great you've done. More like positive affirmation was the stuff that was associated with them losing weight and keeping it off.
Not like you should do it this way.
Exactly. Yeah.
I wanted to touch on, you mentioned there are obese prone and obese, non-obese prone people, right? So these are the naturally thin people, right? Because they just compensate with movement, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I used to do this where I used to think I just can't be like that person. That person's just lucky. But I guess they sort of are, right? They have this baseline movement. Is there a way to change yourself in terms of so for example, I used to take the stairs. I still do take the stairs, but in my last job, the stairs were before the elevator. So I got in that first purposeful motion of taking the stairs, and then it became so habitual that I couldn't even walk past the stairwell. I would be where am I? I have to go up the stairs. So is there a way to sort of become more of that person?
Yeah, you're probably never going to get to the point where you like subconsciously move more, but you can purposely move more, right? And, I track steps. It's kind of a proxy. It's not perfect, but it's kind of a proxy for NEAT. And what I'll tell people is because we had a client with Team BioLane who they found they were having trouble losing weight, even though they were maintaining their body weight originally on a decent calorie level. Well, we looked back at their step data. They never really looked at it, but they had a smartwatch, so it sent the data. Mm-hmm. And when they started dieting over the course of 4 weeks, their steps went in half. So they became less active. So what we said was, okay, we'll just go back to your normal step count. And now, what I like about that is if you end up moving more naturally throughout the day because, like, let's say you're at an expo or whatever, or you're walking around town, a city, well, you don't have to do purposeful cardio then, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're sedentary most of the day, well, maybe you need to go out and do an hour walk or something like that to get back to that step count. And so I think that can be a helpful tool for some people. Just don't become obsessive about it like some people do. And then another thing that I think is important to point out with people who are obese resistant, that phenotype tends to not snack very much. And this is important because I'll have people tell me, they just have such a fast metabolism because I see they eat so much. No, they eat a lot when you see them. They eat a big meal when you see them. But they probably didn't snack. They probably haven't eaten for 6 hours before that. Yeah. Because people who are obese resistant profile, again, they tend to not snack. And that's important because, so when they interview people and ask them their calorie intake, on average, the average reported calorie intake in the United States is 2,400 calories a day, which does not explain the obesity epidemic. No. But if you look at the food consumption data, so it's basically you have an equation of how much food do the companies produce and how much is thrown away. And the difference is how much people have bought and eaten, right? Mm-hmm. It's about 3,500 calories a day.
Which would explain the obesity epidemic.
Right. Yeah. People remember their meals. They don't remember their snacks.
Yeah. And their bites and licks and tastes.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. And those things add up. I had an Instagram post about this. You can easily get 200-300 extra calories in a day just from, like having a few extra bites. I mean, do you know, like take one of the big wine glasses, pour 5 ounces, which is a serving of wine, and then pour 10 ounces. They don't look that much different, so you're like, you're having a glass of wine every night. I can't lose weight. What you're actually having like 12 ounces of wine. You're not even realizing it. Right. So I think it's just, again, part of it is a mindfulness thing. That's a big part of it. And again, that obese resistant phenotype just tend to be more active. They tend to compensate well and good appetite regulation. And again, not very much snacking.
Are you feeling in a rut in the bedroom? Wishing you had the kind of sex life you could brag about? I've spent years helping patients and creating content for people all around the world to improve and optimize their sex life. Today, you can get my knowledge for 100% free with my new ebook called Better Sex, Better Life. In this ebook, I review my top 10 tips for improving your sex life, all from the comfort of your own home. All you have to do is go to renamalikmd.com/morepleasure to download it for free today. So let's talk about carbs. People love to talk about carbs. Now, what do we need as human beings for performance, for optimal brain function? Like, how many carbs do we need? And is keto or low carb, is that like the way everyone should be dieting?
You do not have an obligatory amount of carbohydrate that you need per day. You have an obligatory glucose usage by your body. So your red blood cells have no mitochondria, so they cannot use fatty acids or ketones. So just based on your red blood cells alone, you have an obligatory glucose usage. It's about 120 grams a day. But fortunately for us, you have this thing called a liver, and it can produce 120 grams of glucose per day with absolutely no glucose intake. So it can make that from amino acids and other non-glucose substrates that are what's called gluconeogenic. Like fats are stored as triacylglycerides, which have a glycerol head. When you break down those fatty acids, that glycerol head can be used to help make glucose. So you don't need glucose. And this is one of the tropes that the low carb community trots out there. There's no need for glucose. Okay, Well, there's no need for a cell phone, but it is pretty helpful when it comes to business and stuff. It makes things more convenient, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at like exercise performance, carbs help. I mean, low carb tends to do just fine if you're talking about like ultra endurance stuff. Zach Bitter is a ultra endurance athlete and he's mostly low carb, but I believe in Zach, correct me if I'm wrong. He follows me, so he'll see this. I believe Zach does eat carbs like the week leading up to a long race, but mostly trains in low carb. I believe that's what I've heard. So you can do that. And it's around, I think like around 65% of your VO2 max. Once you get below that, mostly aerobic metabolism, you don't really need a whole lot of glucose. Above 65% of VO2 max, you start getting into some anaerobic metabolism and you need more glucose. So resistance training, high intensity exercise, absolutely better performance with carbohydrates. Now, how many? It's probably not a huge amount, but we do consistently see athletes perform better when they eat carbohydrates, especially if you're dealing with high intensity exercise. And the reason is when you're lacking enough oxygen during high intensity exercise, you are not able to use fatty acids well as part of oxidative respiration of the mitochondria, because oxidative respiration requires oxygen. And so you have to go through anaerobic energy production, which is glycolysis, right? And people think about, well, if you metabolize fatty acids, I think you get like 36 ATP for your 1 gram of fat. If you do 1 gram of carbohydrate, it's not 1 molecule of fat, if you do, it probably depends on how long the tail is, but let's just say a normal length.
On average.
Sure. Carbohydrate, on average, you net out, I think, 6, I want to say. But per unit of oxygen consumption, you actually generate more ATP using carbohydrate. So when it comes to people doing high-intensity exercise, carbohydrate is the preferred source of fuel, and they do perform better on it. Now, when it comes to low-carb, keto, there are some benefits in terms of nothing to do with the insulin stuff that everybody freaks out about. It's mostly ketones have a satiety effect in the brain. It used to be hard to eat low carb and have ultra processed foods. Like you're cutting out, ultra processed is usually a combination of high fat, high sugar, salt, and then texture and whatnot. You're not getting that with traditional keto foods. Now, they make keto ice creams and keto treats now, which I find hilarious because most of these keto ice creams have more calories than the normal ice cream. And it's like, like these keto people make fun of these vegans eating like, vegan mac and cheese or whatever. It's like, well, you're doing the same thing. Like you're missing the whole entire point of why this diet works. It's because you're cutting out a macronutrient group, and it pretty much makes it impossible to eat ultra processed foods that way. And so you're just eating less calories. And people say, no, that's not true. I'm eating way more now. No, you feel like you're eating more because you're eating more satiating foods, and you're probably eating a greater volume or maybe even a greater weight of food, but you're not eating more calories. You're eating less calories. And again, all we need to do is to test this. If we have diets equal in calories and equal in protein, because we talked about that's important because protein has a higher TEF, equal in calories, equal in protein, but varying the carbohydrate amount, do we see differences in fat loss? The short answer is no. The long answer is actually low fat has slightly better fat loss in a meta-analysis of this stuff. Now people go, how can that be? Because if you the kind of carbohydrate insulin model, well, if you eat carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates, you raise insulin. Insulin makes it impossible to lose fat. This, again, there's nothing more dangerous than somebody who's just read a biochemistry textbook without the appropriate context and nuance. So yes, insulin inhibits lipolysis, which is the breakdown of fatty acids. Inhibit is not the same thing as completely block, right? So if we look at how can you lose weight if you're eating a low-fat, higher carb diet? Okay, yes, it inhibits lipolysis, but carbohydrate isn't really stored as body fat. You mostly just oxidize it, right? So let's take a high-carb, low-fat diet. And they've done metabolic tracer studies to show that the fat that winds up in adipose, in body fat, 98% of it originates as fat. Less than 2% originates as carbohydrate. So if you eat a high carb diet, you're not burning a lot of fat, but you're also not storing a lot of fat. There's two sides to this equation. And the balance is going to be how much energy you're taking in versus expending, right? Let's take a low carb diet. Yes, you burn a lot of fat, but you also store a lot of fat. The question is your fat storage exceeding your amount of fat oxidation? And so when you compare these two, equal in calories and protein, you don't really see differences because calories in, calories out. And it's so funny to watch the mental gymnastics from the hardcore low carb groups. I mean, they basically, once you show them this kind of research, they just go, well, who funded it? And then they talk about personal anecdote. And that's always my favorite because I'm like, well, my anecdote's better than yours across the board. Like all these low carb gurus, I'm like, I'm leaner, stronger, and more muscular than you. So if you want to go with anecdote, I win.
Right.
So sit down. I'm not saying low carb is a bad diet. It seems to be, for fat loss, just as effective as other diets out there. But there's no extra benefit. You might get a little bit faster resolution of, if you're like type 2 diabetic, you might see your blood markers resolve a little bit faster doing low carb. But on the long term, you'll get to a similar place just through losing the amount of body fat. Body fat itself is inflammatory and has negative feedback on glucose metabolism and insulin regulation and insulin sensitivity when you have excess body fat. So long term, it's about losing enough fat mass. Short term, your blood markers may resolve a little bit faster on low carb. But again, I would default to what can you consistently execute? What can you be compliant with?
What we believe is that people are losing more weight on low carb diets is because it's easier to maintain lower calories. Because as you mentioned, it's more
and the other thing is low carb causes water loss. So you can lose up to 2 to 3 kilograms of water from a low carb diet. They've shown this in studies. And it's so funny when they'll trot out some of these meta-analyses. They're like, well, look at this one where, and they're never controlling calories, but look at this one where the low carb group lost more weight. And I go into the raw data. I'm like, yeah, they lost 1 kilo more, which is completely explained by the body water that they lost initially in the diet. So not really impressive.
Yeah. I do want to cover the carnivore diet because people are obsessed with this carnivore diet. And I'm really concerned by people not getting enough fiber because we know that there is so many benefit to fiber intake in terms of lower colon cancer risk, improved satiety. Improved,
that's just all healthy user bias, you know.
And people really push back. And I mean, I know it's because of all this fear mongering and we know something you don't know, but I want your thoughts on it.
Well, dear Illuminati, make sure you make out my check from Big Food to, BioLane LLC after this interview. As somebody who was, I said this on a podcast in 2018 where I was debating Sean Baker, who's a carnivore advocate. I said, as somebody whose research was sponsored by the National Dairy Council, the Egg Nutrition Center, and the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, it's kind of wild for me to be on a podcast defending the virtues of plants and saying to people, maybe calm down on the animal protein just a little bit, all right? I'm a big fan of high-quality animal protein. I think it's a great way to get in high-quality protein, very bioavailable, usually a good amino acid profile. But this idea that, like, fiber... I mean, I was on a podcast with Paul Saladino, like, back in that same time period, and I actually came across kind of poorly on it because I was not fully aware of his debate proposition. And he basically said fiber is like toilet paper. You might as well just eat toilet paper because it just goes right through you, which is not true either because soluble fiber, there's metabolic effects to soluble fiber. And all these studies is all just healthy user bias. And I was honestly so shocked that it probably took me about the full podcast length to recover and actually form coherent thoughts. And they always trot out this one study on constipation showing, with no control group, where they told people who were constipated, it was all self-reported symptoms, who were constipated to eat less fiber, and they came back, and on average, they had like lower symptoms. Okay, let's put pooping aside, all right?
Well, and we don't know how much they were drinking, right?
Which, by the way, if you increase your fiber intake, but you don't increase your water intake, it can make you constipated. Which, by the way, the meta-analyses very clearly show that fiber leads to increased defecation frequency and ease of defecation. So, but let's just take that out of it. pooping is not why you should eat fiber. You should eat it because it is very consistently associated with decreased risk of mortality, cardiovascular disease, cancer. And people, they'll say, well, this is healthy user bias. If it was healthy user bias, you wouldn't see every study see the same thing. Okay. There would be, like, let's take red meat, for example. Okay. I am not convinced that red meat is carcinogenic in any way, shape, or form. I'm not convinced that it causes cancer, because when they do studies where they're more controlled for overall diet quality, they don't really see this. And so I'm thinking of a classic Maximova, I think it's Maximova 2020 out of Canada, where they looked at 100,000 people and basically were able to control for diet quality by the fruit and vegetable consumption. So in low fruit and vegetable consumption, going from low meat, red meat intake to high red meat intake did increase the risk of cancer. But at high fruit and vegetable consumption, high red meat consumption actually had a lower risk of cancer than the reference group. So to me, that says, okay, that's healthy user bias. And again, you see the studies on red meat and cancer are kind of all over the map. Some of them show it, some of them don't. I am not aware of a single study on fiber showing that it does not decrease the risk of mortality, cancer, and cardiovascular disease in these cohorts. It's like, if we do a forest plot, it's all on the side of, like, this is not healthy user bias. I realize that correlation is not supposed to be causation, but I'm sorry, you can't do a 40-year randomized control trial on humans. So we have to look at cohort data. And then we can go look at the randomized control trials and look at the effects on cardiovascular disease markers, on blood lipids, on insulin sensitivity, all which improve. Liver fat improves with higher fiber diets. And so telling people you don't need to eat fiber, you don't need to eat fruits and vegetables, that, like, hey, if you like eating meat, cool. I would say, hey, you can eat meat without eating a ton of saturated fat. You can choose leaner cuts of meat, eat fish, these sorts of things. Maybe calm down on 5 ribeyes a day, right? But this is a group of emotional toddlers who basically didn't like to eat fruits and vegetables when mommy made them do it, and now they have a reason that they can avoid it. I mean, I'm not saying that about every single person. Like, again, I'm sure some people with some IBS symptoms, they probably do feel better in the short term by reducing their fiber intake of their fruits and vegetables. But if they added back in one at a time different fruits and vegetables and saw what they tolerated, they'd probably be able to tolerate it just fine. And they make the improper assumption that, oh, I have tummy ache, that means I'm inflamed. No, those two things are very different. And so when people talk about inflammation, I'm always like, oh yeah, what was your level of HSCRP? Oh, you don't know? You didn't have it measured? Yeah, you don't know what your inflammation was, so sit down. And they use kind of these terms that get to be nebulous, kind of taken on this nebulous terms of gut health, inflammation, these, autophagy, right? These are all these garbage can health terms. And I'm always like, if you can't measure it and you can't tell me and quantify it, it means nothing. And so I tell people, okay, well, let's look at the effects of fiber and fruits and vegetables on inflammation. Oh, it's very powerful anti-inflammatory. Okay. So at every level, we have mechanistic studies. We know, for example, soluble fiber increases short chain fatty acid production. We know that propionate, butyrate, all these things have metabolic benefits. So we know the mechanisms. It also lowers LDL cholesterol. Well, carnivore people would tell you that LDL cholesterol doesn't matter. Okay. Let me introduce you to Mendelian randomization studies. We also know that perhaps insoluble fiber, by increasing bulk, reduces the risk of things like diverticulitis, which is a risk factor for colon cancer. And perhaps I know vegans like this term, the toxic sludge in your gut or whatever, but perhaps by having stool have less time to interact with cells in the intestine, that lowers the risk of colorectal cancer as well. So insoluble fiber is very consistently associated with a lower risk of colorectal cancer. And we have the epidemiology, we have the long-term cohort studies. I mean, everything lines up. It's like if red meat had this level of data to support it being so healthy, carnivore people would lose their freaking minds if you ever suggested or even dared suggest it wasn't a health food. And so this gets what I talk about. I'm like, it's very important to apply logic symmetrically, because if you were going to apply a lot, let me give you an example of that. So let's take our original example, Paul Saladino talking about these isolated compounds in fruits and vegetables, or he eats fruit now, sorry.
Broccoli.
In vegetables, right? Okay, without regard for dosage, whatever, it's going to do this. Don't we have to do the same thing with meat? Mm-hmm. Well, what about heme iron? What about NUE5GC? What about polyaromatic hydrocarbons? What about heterocyclic amines, right? All these things are toxic in animal studies where they give them, but are they toxic or carcinogenic at the dosage found in well, I'm not sure, right? And again, I would say maybe not, based on some of these more well-controlled studies. But that's how also to know if a group of people are actually interested in truth is, do they apply their logic symmetrically?
Yeah.
And across the board with these diet cults, you see that no, they apply it very asymmetrically. And
they cherry pick their data.
Exactly. And if you try to spin the logic back on them, they just end up resorting to somebody paid for the study, Illuminati, something or another, government, and here's my random anecdote. And I promise that everything I'm saying, people are like, well, this person said they did this and this happened. I'm like, oh yeah, people have never lied for profit or fame before, right? Nobody would do that.
Of course.
Talk to the owner of Theranos?
Theranos,
Yeah. Nobody ever lied to make money. Jeez, Liver King wasn't lying to make money. I mean, come on.
All right, I'm gonna, because I want to be respectful of your time. I have one last pet peeve of mine with nutrition, and it is when people say eat X, Y, Z to boost your testosterone, get better erections, take nitric oxide boosting. Beets are the best vegetable or fruit. I don't know, is beet a fruit or vegetable? I don't know, but either way,
I think it's a vegetable.
It's a vegetable. So it's the best vegetable for boosting your erections. And I personally have a real pet peeve, because I'm like, you have people eating chips and then they're like eating, a beet juice every day, and they're like, yeah, I got it. But is there any genuine data to back that up?
So I describe that as, I'm going to use a very unscientific example, but let's say there's a tank driving at me, and I take a 9mm handgun. I shoot it at the tank. Physics dictates that I did slow the tank down, but you're not going to notice it when it runs you over, right? If you're not sleeping well, if your overall lifestyle is crappy, you don't exercise, you don't do the things that you're supposed to, that's the stuff that helps with sexual function and testosterone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like when I've had my testosterone measured probably a dozen times since I was like 18 years old. The lowest it's ever come out at was 750. The highest, I think I actually hit like 1050 or something like that, right? And I mean, like, I usually have a pretty healthy libido, mm-hmm. And obviously, like, maybe it helps me in lifting and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But also it goes both ways, right? Like, I don't drink a ton of alcohol. I don't have crappy sleep all the time. I'm not stressed out all the time. I don't do a bunch of hard drugs. I'm active. I resistance train. Like, I do the big stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, okay, beets increase nitric oxide. Maybe that make your boner like 0.1% harder. Okay, cool. If you're still living a really crappy lifestyle, you're not going to notice it. So good luck with that, I guess, Yeah. But it's all... one of my favorite quotes, and I say it all the time, the magic you are looking for is in the work you keep attempting to avoid.
Yeah.
If you took the time and the mental space that you spend trying to hack your way around hard work, and you just did the work, you would be so liberated by how it's not even that much work, really. Like, once you get into it, it's just about reframing your habits and lifestyle. I don't feel like I live any less of a fulfilling life doing the stuff I do. In fact, I love it. If you do what is easy, your life will be hard. If you do what is hard, your life will be rewarding. It is possibly the greatest dichotomy of life, which is whatever makes it easier in the short term will invariably make it more difficult in the long term. Personal relationships, avoiding hard conversations, makes it worse in the long term. Raising kids. Let them play on their screens. Don't discipline them. Easier in the short term, harder in the long term. Don't exercise. Easy in the short term, hard in the long term. You can go down the list, saving money. Hard in the short term, sacrifice. Long term, makes your life better, right? Yeah. If you could just embrace that, if people could just embrace that. I mean, I'm going to give a quote. Do you know Ethan Suplee? You familiar with him? So he's a Hollywood actor. He lost 300 pounds. He was in Remember the Titans. He was in My Name is Earl. He was a very large guy. He was over, I think he said the heaviest he ever weighed himself was like 540 pounds or something like that. And he's like, I probably was bigger than that, but I just never could bring myself to get on the scale. And now he's like 220 and jacked. I was on his podcast. He was telling me the story about he went for a 90-minute ruck. He's like, I went for a 90-minute ruck yesterday, and I wore a 50-pound rucksack, and it was really hard. And then I think about, I used to wear 6 of those. And no matter how hard that 90 minutes of exercise was, my life is infinitely easier now by doing it. And I think so many people, I wish you could take them, if they're overweight, obese, metabolically unhealthy, so many of them, they just don't believe that if they do the work, they'll get what they want. They don't believe it. If you could just put them in that healthy body for one day and say, this is what this feels like, I think they'd be tripping over themselves to do the work, right? Because they don't, it's like you toss a frog in the pot that's boiling, it jumps out. But if you keep the frog and slowly boil the water, frog stays in and boils to death, right? Yeah. And I think obesity is a very insidious disease in that way. It doesn't usually happen overnight. It's usually a very slow, decades-long progression. And it slowly, insidiously, and without a lot of people even realizing, creeps up on you. And you don't realize how hard your life has become because you've slowly made adjustments for your lifestyle. Like Ethan told me, he's like, one thing I used to do that, like, I look back and I go, oh my God, like, this is crazy. He's like, whenever I go to sit down, I would push on his chair really hard to make sure it wasn't going to collapse when I sat down. You know, like, that is not a thought that's ever gone through my head, right? Yeah. Never. Maybe like a child's plastic chair, right? Yeah. But that's not a thought that's ever gone through my, like, I didn't sit down in this chair like, oh, I wonder if this one's going to hold up, you know? So I think, again, embrace the work. That is doing the hard things. That's what's rewarding. When I think about the hardest things I've ever done, winning a world championship, squatting a world record, doing a PhD, when I look back on like the fond memories I have, I don't look back on me walking across the stage to get my PhD. I look back on the times where I was crying coming home from lab because another thing I tried didn't work, feeling like I was never going to get through it and wanting to quit. That's what I look back on and I'm fond about because I'm like, man, it was hard and I stuck it out and it worked out. Yeah. So that's what I would appeal to people is, and hey, if you need some help with, you know, GLP-1 mimetics, those sorts of things, I'm all for that. But look at adjusting your lifestyle. It is, the juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's wrap up a little bit. Tell me what's something you're working on right now that you're excited about?
I mean, I've been, like, our app Carbon is something, you know, it's been around for 4 years now. We just celebrated our 4th year anniversary. And, you know, now having tens of thousands of users through, I mean, we've had so many cool stories. I've been thinking of, we had a user, I think her name was Caitlin Chung. She was on like blood pressure medication, type 2 diabetes medication, like, you know, all this stuff. And I believe last I checked, she had lost like 70 or 80 pounds. She was off all of her medications. And I mean, hearing stories like that, and I'm sure if they, you know, that's one, there's dozens, we've had people lose well over 100 pounds using the app. And, you know, that's a tool that's like less than $10 a month, right? Because like I loved coaching people one-on-one, and we still offer that through Team BioLayne, but not everybody can afford one-on-one coaching. And so like having a tool out there that really anyone can afford to help them get through this, that's been something I've been very proud of. As far as stuff I'm working on, like we just released last year my Physique Coaching Academy, which, you know, I really, as I've gotten older, I've thought about like, what is the legacy I want to leave behind? And I am very passionate about helping young coaches do better, because I really feel like, okay, maybe, the maximum people I can reach is, I never thought I'd get to 1 million, but if maybe I can influence, and I know I've influenced some other coaches who have massive followings as well, but now I've got like an actual, course that people can go through to learn the coaching techniques I use, evidence-based, fitness advice, nutrition, resistance exercise, because there's PT, PT courses out there, personal training, there's nutrition courses out there, but nothing really synergizes nutrition, resistance training, aerobic exercise, and supplements together. And so that's what I did with Professor Bill Campbell at USF. And it's something we're very, very proud of. So
that's awesome.
It's, it's been cool. And then, I do a bunch of other stuff, my research review, my supplement company, supplement company's been pretty successful, which I'm very proud of, again, because, we don't make crazy claims about stuff. We've just, grown it slow. And I think we have over 70% of our customers are multi-time customers, which is very high in the supplement industry. And so again, that's something we're very proud of. So, I'm just really focused on trying to scale those things, trying to get, more eyeballs on them. I've got a really great team of people around me who care about me, who really try to like free me up to do the stuff I'm good at, like this. And, then eventually I do want to start my own podcast. And I think I would like to write a book at some point as well. I've written books, but they're all self-published. I think I would, like to do something where I'm actually going through a publisher or something like that. And so those are in the future, but I don't want to start those until I feel like I've gotten, these things firmly entrenched. But I feel like it's getting there,
So we may have covered some of these. These are sort of like rapid fire questions, but
good luck rapping with me.
I know. Something now that you wish you learned earlier.
I read a book on boundaries this last year, and I wish I had read that when I was 18. That was very enlightening. And, realizing that, it made more sense for my brain when I looked at it like filters. So boundaries are how you teach people how to treat you. And you can have whatever boundaries you want, but it might mean that you have to enforce those when somebody violates that. That means limiting access to you if you can, right? And so what these actually made sense to me as is these are filters for your life, because the right people will filter in and respect your boundaries if they are reasonable boundaries.
Right.
And the wrong people will filter themselves out. And, I had great parents. I had, a good childhood other than being really bullied. I think actually that's where a lot of my, childhood trauma comes from, is the bullying. And I think I never felt like I could be so assertive with my peers because I was so afraid of being rejected, because I didn't really have that many friends growing up, and I didn't, never got attention from girls, that whole thing. So, reading that book, Boundaries, was a big like aha moment for me. I know it's not a nutrition thing, but that's something
it's really important. I think it also tells you what people think of you, right? If they respect your boundaries, then they're someone that you value. Whereas if someone is like, how dare you put that boundary up, then they don't respect you as a person, right?
Yeah, I know. And that's been my experience. Like my best friend, he didn't do anything wrong, but I kind of like had to enforce something one time, and he was like, okay, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like, it was completely...
And you were probably so stressed about doing it.
I was so worried about it, But it's like, the right people will filter in and the wrong people will filter out. And kind of on that note, somebody asked me on a podcast one time, and this kind of relates, what's the most unhealthy thing you did when you were younger? And again, I'm like really on this mental health kick now, probably from being friends with John. But I said... I thought about it. I'm like, well, I didn't go out and party. I didn't drink a lot. I got sleep. I exercised. I said, keeping people in my life who were not good for me, whether it was friendships, business partners, romantic relationships, that kind of stuff. I think John said that it's hard to be depressed and stressed when you have the right people in your life. If you are surrounded by a group of good people, it's hard to be depressed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the missing pieces. And I think COVID really did us a disservice with this, was that like human connection. Mm-hmm. That's why when people ask me about like AI and coaching, I'm like, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it because there's different than a mechanical advice telling you to do something versus another human being.
Absolutely.
I get coaching because I respect my coach, want to make him proud, and we have like a personal relationship. That's what makes a great coach.
Yeah. What's a non-negotiable for you? Something you have to do every day?
Eat. I don't fast. I eat. Not every day, but I mean, I love to train. It's like my zen. It's my purest form of therapy. I love to resistance train. There are days where I don't feel like going, but for the most part, I'm usually pretty fired up to go. That would be a non-negotiable for me.
And do you have a health hack or life hack you want to share?
I guess the life hack would be learning to manage psychological stress better. I have my times where I regress and I don't manage it well, but I also have gotten better about not shaming myself about not managing it well. Because you could get stuck in that rumination cycle where like you get stressed out and then you get stressed out because you're stressed out.
Why did I
handle it better?
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, go outside, walk by the water, breathe a little bit, have a chat, spend some time with a friend, and you'll feel better.
Right. So if you couldn't be a power lifter, couldn't have done your PhD, what would you do?
Something that probably involves talking. I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was young. I love the ocean, still love the ocean. I like fishing. Honestly, I don't know what I would do. I really don't. Maybe a podcast host, I like talking.
You will be that.
Yeah, exactly. I like talking, so.
All right. Well, Layne, thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Instagram's kind of my digital business card, @BioLayne. I'm BioLayne on pretty much every platform. And then my website is biolayne.com. And then our app, Carbon Diet Coach, you can find on iOS and Android. And then all the other stuff I sell, you can find on my website, biolayne.com.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I had fun.
Thank you guys so much for joining us on today's episode of the Rena Malik MD podcast. If you are enjoying this podcast, be sure to subscribe and share these episodes with your friends. Share screenshots on social media. I love to see it. Tag me and I will repost your content as well. Tell me what you learned from these episodes and what you want to learn about more, either in the comments on YouTube or Spotify, or send me a message. And as always, remember to take care of yourself because you're worth it.